Welcome to Vote 2024. It is Super Tuesday in Texas. I'm Steve Spriester along with Myra. Arthur, we're in the heart of the KSAT newsroom for our election night live stream, and there are a lot of races to watch locally that have grabbed the attention of not only the San Antonio area, but statewide. The influence of Governor Abbott, the influence of Attorney General Ken Paxton, and the influence of super PACs when it comes into some of the races that we are seeing locally.
And the influence of an issue called school vouchers, and one that has played statewide in several special sessions. We have a power panel to talk about all of this, from what's happening at the national, state, and local level. We would like to get to their introductions. Kevin Wolf, former Bexar County Commissioner, San Antonio City Councilman as well. Molly Cox, former SA 2020 CEO and local consultant, and DeMonte Alexander, political consultant who's been involved in county and city races. Thank you all so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm standing by because Molly said don't get in the way of her close-up. So
I did, and I'm waiting.
That's why I'm standing over here out of the way, because I listen to what Molly has to say.
Thank you.
All right, so and Molly, I want to start with you.
Oh, goodness.
Let's talk about turnout, because we don't have any numbers right now. They should be coming in any minute.
Yeah.
When we talk about turnout,
yes,
usually it's thought Republicans vote early, Democrats vote day of.
Right.
Am I right?
That's generally-ish.
Is there anything we can take from the numbers that we've seen early so far?
Yeah,
that you take from those numbers?
It doesn't look good for Democrats on the ticket. I think it bears out that we clearly have a challenge on the Democrat side with who's at the top of the ticket if they can't turn people out. We're looking at a 50% reduction in early voting on the Democrat side between 2020 and 2024. We had the highest voter turnout in the history of Bexar County elections in 2020, and we're now seeing about 7% early vote turnout overall. 25% increase in the Republican side, and we know that people can switch and swap parties, but I can't imagine that that's happening at the depths at which it's happening.
Yeah, Kevin, what do you read from this?
Yeah, a 2-to-1 difference statewide between Republicans and Democrats, and I agree with Molly. It's people vote top of the ticket, and that's what brings them out or doesn't bring them out. And on the D side, you don't have anything generating an excitement, whereas you got maybe too much excitement on the R side. It's even in your urban D counties, like Bexar County, which is about a 60-40 split between D and R, Republicans are outvoting Democrats. So the only good news for Democrats is, I'd say, if you are an incumbent Democrat, tonight might not be such a bad thing, because the only Democrats showing up are the ones that always show up, and they're more than likely going to know your name.
So is there an element of that is not surprising, though? If we typically, in a presidential race, if we've got a Democratic incumbent, do we see in a primary more Republican voters come out, and then vice versa when we have a Republican president with a real contest on the Democratic side?
I think that's a fair statement. Yeah, it's like you've got a Democrat that's an incumbent right now at the presidential level. You've got a lot of noise about the upcoming race, and it's the folks wanting to get in the door that make the most noise, that want to do something. And so I agree with you that it's not totally unusual. It's a little unusual that it's split this far. As I said, a 2-to-1. Yes,
as much as it is.
Yeah.
DeMonte, I want you to weigh in on this.
Well, I agree with my colleague said here, especially Kevin. I had that written down about, Biden really doesn't have an opponent. Well, he does, but he doesn't, right? And so that's going to keep people home. But I would also go further and say a lot of us, like myself and others, are not too impressed, and that could be a part of it too, is where, hey, this could be probably not a good sign for Biden coming down the road, is you're even losing some of your base supporters based on what we've seen in the past few years. But altogether, if you want things to change, if you want things to look different than they currently are, it starts with voter registration. If you start tonight, it's already too late. It starts with voter registration, and then an aggressive program to get those voters out to vote if you want to see real change. And obviously, we're not seeing that.
Yeah. All right. We're going to get back to this, but I know that our John Paul Barajas is standing by live from election headquarters right now to give us the very latest on the numbers. So, John Paul, what are you hearing out there? Jackie Callanan, the elections administrator, what is she saying about turnout day of?
As of 6:30, 70,812 people have voted today since polls opened up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Of those, 43,000 of those, or more than 43,000, were Republicans, and nearly 27,500 were Democrats, and 14.2% of registered voters in Bexar County have cast their ballot so far. Jackie says she hopes to get to 15 by the end of all this, and 15% isn't bad for a primary, but she says it is a little bit disappointing when you consider the 1.2 million registered voters in Bexar County. Now out here, we saw a late push at around 6 o'clock, the last hour or so, when people were pulling in, trying to get their votes. Still not a large turnout here at election headquarters, but she told us the lowest polling site they had only saw 10 people today. So we also hope to have another update here shortly, but as you guys have been talking about, definitely a low voter turnout.
John Paul Barajas live from election headquarters. Thank you, John Paul. We'll check in with you a little bit later during this live stream. Appreciate that. So a little over 70,000 people voted today. We have heard anecdotally that there have been lines in places like the Tobin Library.
Right, Bracalo, that's an always popular place.
Lions Field, some other places.
Yeah.
And before we move on with the power panel, I want to introduce sort of the, let's call him power panel pro tem maybe, John Taylor, who comes with us. John, come over here. John is from, of course, UTSA and the political science department. And is this working?
Is this thing on?
Is this working? Is it on?
Yes.
All right. John, talk about the races that you're watching tonight, and I'll let you go.
Oh, okay, thank you. Definitely House District 121 between Allison and Hood. We also should be watching Precinct 1 and Precinct 3 for Bexar County, those commissioners' races. We also should be looking at races just a little outside San Antonio, in Seguin and in Fredericksburg. Let's also be watching CD 23 as well. And then, statewide, there's a few others as well. But let's be honest, I'll declare right now, and you can too, Trump and Biden won the Republican and Democratic primary.
Right, that's a for sure. That's a for sure going to happen. So when we talk about the governor's influence and the attorney general's influence, that's kind of what I want you to watch tonight. Is watch those races and tell me exactly what you see.
Well, I'm going to be watching basically Ken Paxton and Greg Abbott's revenge tours and see how much they had an influence. In particular, Greg Abbott and the amount of money he has raised and the amount of money he is spending. He spent $600 grand just on 4 people who voted against his voucher plan. Let's see where that goes tonight. And one of the biggest people was, of course, Steve Allison.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting to watch. Myra, you have anything you want to ask John before we let him go back to his phone and pick everything up from here?
No, I think that's a huge part of this primary.
Sure.
What we talked about just in our 6:30 Q&A there about how the governor, Ken Paxton, school vouchers, none of it's on the ballot, but they're all 3 huge factors in this race. Do you feel like, let's say that we see people win who the governor campaigned against. Do you feel like this is a test of his popularity?
Oh, it absolutely is. Let's imagine this. Greg Abbott doesn't take these people out tonight. The 2025 legislative session, if you thought 23 was bad and the special sessions, just imagine what 25 will be like.
Yeah.
All right, John, here's the deal. This apparently isn't working.
Not a problem.
Thankfully, you project. Yeah, so we're going to get you. We're going to get you. I think we're going to get this fixed, or we're going to get you your own lav mic. But we appreciate you being here and following those races for us.
Also crunching numbers.
All right, thanks, John. All right, so when we talk about the governor's influence in this race, we talked a little bit about it on air at 6:30. Have you ever seen anything like this before? And being the Republican sitting on this panel, Kevin, I'll start with you.
I would tell you no. I mean, you always see some level of this, I'm going to get you that type of thing, but I've never seen such a concerted effort backed by money. So, you heard John say earlier how much has been spent against Steve Allison, et cetera. We're talking serious dollars here. And we all know that, right, wrong, or indifferent, money talks in an election cycle. And so those candidates that are running against the incumbents that are being aimed at, that's a whole other source of funds that they wouldn't normally get.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fact that after Trump left office the first time, there was definitely a play, right, where he was coming. He wasn't on the ballot, but he was definitely on the ballot, right? What happened on January 6th, et cetera, that was happening at a national level, and we saw that going. But yeah, from a statewide perspective, I've never seen anything like
Well,
this.
that's what, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what this, to me, this is almost out of the Donald Trump playbook
Yes.
of
Yes.
endorsing people, and not just endorsing them, actively
putting cash behind it.
cash against them,
Your own people.
against
Right.
your own people. But even further than that, DeMonte, is this also a sign of just how dominant the Republican Party is in the state of Texas? That they basically, instead of targeting Democrats right now, they're targeting their own.
Well, it could be a little bit of both. Two things can exist at once, right? But what I wanted to really focus on is the people who really lose. It's the people who really lose when this type of stuff happens. The issues that we should be talking about, they get lost because we're talking about a loyalty to a party versus really caring about what the neighborhoods and the communities really think that are important and that want their elected officials to be a champion of. And so I think a lot of these gotcha politics are kind of getting in the way of that.
Yeah. DeMonte, to your point, one of the issues that I think people, Democrat or Republican, think we should be talking about is what's happening on the border. And if you look at some of the ads where the governor has said, I'm campaigning against this person, Steve Allison, for example, he's not talking, we talked about this yesterday at 6:30, he's not talking about school vouchers, he's talking about the border.
He's
But
saying,
the
I
voucher
can't trust him on the
vote-
border because of the voucher.
The voucher vote is where those two people had a difference. I find that interesting, that those ads aren't about school vouchers.
No, it's not. It's about the soundbite, and it's about what we talked about before, and that's weaponizing, true governmental issues that need to be addressed. But instead of addressing them, we spend our time beating each other up about them and trying to grab that soundbite. What does border security or immigration have to do with school vouchers? Not a thing. But makes a good little soundbite. Oh, I can't trust this person because of that.
Well, and if we marry all of these things, right, like the idea that we're not talking about the things that impact our lives as Texans every day or as parents or as students, we're thinking about public school funding and how per student, per pupil, we are not funding students at the rate that they need to be. Our public schools are actually lowest funded. We have one of the lowest rates of educational attainment in the nation, and somehow we've turned this into a school voucher conversation, as opposed to how are we helping students thrive? How are we helping them get through school? How are we helping them get into the workforce? None of those conversations are able to be happening because we're talking about school vouchers
And I would say,
immigration somehow.
And I would say it's also about the language, right? One side's using an invasion,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Right, and Democrats are trying to take a more compassionate approach to it. I think Democrats want to solve this too, right? But it's a matter of what type of language you're using, right? And some of it is really incendiary, and some of it could be a little, not enough. But that's when we use that type of language. That's what gets both of these ends fired up, and then the people in the middle, the people who really want to get these things done, they kind of get drowned out by all the noise. Yeah.
All right, so we're just getting started. We're going to get our first early returns in, hopefully soon. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're watching KSAT's live stream of Election Night 2024.
Still a line at IGO.
At IGO?
A line?
Interesting.
That's good. That is good.
All right, so they have like a minute break. We're taking 4-minute breaks during this whole thing. It's like a new thing.
But your mics,
But your mics, I don't know if
consider
they're
them
necessary.
all, your mics at least some early voting totals. We'd like to take a look at some of the races that we have results for at this point. I believe we're starting with U.S. rep races. Let's take a look at what we have right now. Okay,
Yeah.
so no totals yet in this District 15 race.
Yeah, these are numbers just from Bexar County, if I'm
Yes.
not mistaken. Let's go to the next race. Let's hopefully get to a race that actually has numbers. District 15, not it. That was a Republican and the Democrats. Here we go. District 23, Democrats. Lee Bossinger with 59% to 41% for his opponent right now. Again, these are just early voting numbers.
Next race we have up tonight. I guess that's the only race that we've got a couple of results for, but we know that we've got Dylan Collier standing by. He is watching the Steve Allison and Mark LaHood race. He's keeping tabs on that. That's the District 121 race, which we have seen the governor really trying to influence. We'll get to him in just a little bit for an update on that. This is another big race to watch in District 23.
Yeah, now again, these are just Bexar County numbers. 50% for Tony Gonzalez, 20% for Brandon Herrera, who has aggressively gone after Tony Gonzalez as stabbing Donald Trump in the back, and Julie Clark, who is actually one of the people that brought up to the Republican Party to censure Tony Gonzalez. So you can see right now Tony Gonzalez with 50% and really splitting the vote between Brandon Herrera and Miss Clark.
Okay, look for president here on the Democratic side. Not a big surprise here in Bexar County. Joe Biden, the incumbent, of course, with 88% of the vote.
I think these have to be statewide numbers when you see 270,000 votes for Donald Trump. I'm guessing these are statewide numbers right now. Joe Biden with 88% of the vote. Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips bringing up the rest of the pack. And this is how it breaks down in Bexar County. 89% voting for Joe Biden, 3% for Marianne Williamson.
28. 30. Oh, wow.
Next race up,
this
this is a big one to watch. Okay, so statewide numbers here. Colin Allred, 67%. Roland Gutierrez, 11%. This would be for who will challenge Ted Cruz in November.
This has to be very disappointing for the Roland Gutierrez camp, and I want to bring the panel in on this one. I mean, we saw some of the early numbers from Bexar County that had Colin Allred at 50% in Bexar County, which surprises me because that's where Roland Gutierrez has been a city councilman, where Roland Gutierrez has been a representative, where Roland Gutierrez has been a state senator. So 67% statewide. Your read on these numbers, DeMonte, I'll start with you.
Well, it's early, but some are surprising in terms of, for example, Precinct 1, you have a lot of candidates, and I think Rebecca's coming in at, 48% right now? And that's what we talked about earlier, is when you have too many candidates, especially if a couple of those campaigns really kind of take some root and run a really good campaign, it could pull away from her winning outright. And so that's one that really stands out for me right now.
Yeah. Are you surprised with the Gutierrez numbers?
It feels exponential. 67% is a pretty high hit right at the beginning. It's really difficult to sort of come back from that. I don't know how you pull somebody down below 50% from 67%. If I was Roland Gutierrez, I'd feel not great right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't come back from that.
Right.
Just is what it is. I am surprised at the spread, but remember, we're from here.
Right,
So,
yes.
we know a lot more about Roland when you're looking at, a race throughout the state of Texas. Hey, local council people, etc., you're a blip. Okay, and unless you get some sort of play from someplace else, which he got in regards to Uvalde at some level, but obviously it wasn't enough to push up that name recognition.
Yeah. I'm surprised by this.
Yeah. And I think there was the question we were asking earlier, would we see any kind of runoff in this? But you're thinking even with these early numbers, this is it.
I can't imagine.
Margin of error is 4%, and that should tell you kind of how far off he is.
Yeah.
Even since the last time we saw it, Allred has ticked up another percentage point. He's now at 68%.
But you can
This one's done.
also attribute it to the money raised, money spent, and this is what we
Yes,
talk about,
absolutely.
right?
Significantly more.
Colin Allred had tons of money, right? And you're able to reach more voters that way. You're able to send 50,000 texts.
I'm also going to say something a little controversial. Colin Allred is a football player in Texas.
Yeah.
So automatically people are like, football, right? Like they just automatically.
That's not controversial at all.
I know,
it's just
that's why I
true.
said it.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's true. They were like,
I'll
football.
also say you got to. There could be okay, who's better to represent, to go up against Ted Cruz. Exactly.
And you see state polls that show right now
Both, yeah,
neck and neck.
neck and neck.
Right.
Right, so maybe that's also
Yeah,
part of this
absolutely.
whole thing. Yeah, and Gutierrez holding his campaign watch party here in town at the Friendly Spot. We hope to catch up with him a little bit later. By the way, the winner of that will take on Ted Cruz. He's got 89% of the vote tonight. Not a big surprise.
No, not a surprise there at all. Do we have any other totals that we can run through for races that we are keeping an eye on?
This is in Bexar County, 86% of the vote for Ted Cruz to 8%
Yeah.
for Holland Gibson.
Yeah, really perfecting the statewide totals there. Still waiting on some numbers here for these races that we're continuing to watch. I know that we've got some reporters who are, of course, fanned out across our area looking at how some of these campaigns are watching these early totals. We're still waiting for
All
them
right,
to be
I want to
able
bring John Taylor on because John Taylor's mouthing something to me, and I have no idea what he's mouthing to me. So this is why I'm glad you're sitting right here. So tell me
Allison is way behind on the early vote numbers.
what are the numbers right now?
Okay, this is me being blind, so I have to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's see. He was down.
Yeah, he's at 40.
He's at 40%. Mark LaHood almost 54%.
Does that surprise you?
Surprising. For early vote, that's surprising.
Yeah.
It means that LaHood's people got out there. It means Greg Abbott's money may be winning on this one.
Yeah. How about the Kemple Schoolcraft?
Temple
vote?
one, that one, I have having difficulty finding at the moment. But
Yeah,
I'll get back to it.
That's very interesting. All right, thank you,
Okay.
John.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Wow.
That's interesting. 54%.
Yes.
I mean, I'm surprised at that. I thought Steve Allison, longtime incumbent, would be hard to beat. But when you see the places where there have been lines, those are in that district. Most of them, anyway.
Steve's in real trouble. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you know, your general rule is if you're at 54 plus, you're pretty safe. As an incumbent, if you're going to end up in a runoff and you're sub 45, you're in real trouble. All right. So Steve's just got to play for a runoff at this point and hope that election day is a lot different than early vote, but it's not looking good.
Yeah.
I believe we're hearing now from Steve Allison's opponent, Mark LaHood, addressing a crowd or addressing our Dylan.
I think he's
Collier
talking to
out
Dylan
there.
Collier, so let's
Yeah.
see if we can listen in a little bit. Oh, and it went away. The beauty of live TV.
Live streams, perfect.
We had him. I swear that was Mark LaHood. But anyway, we'll get back to it. I mean,
Yeah, we'll talk to him in a bit.
Allison spent some money in this race, though, too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Allison's never had an issue with raising money since he started, but obviously when now that's coupled with Governor Abbott infusing Mark LaHood's campaign, without Governor Abbott's help, I don't think Mark LaHood wins the race.
Right.
Yeah. Well, he took on Joe Gonzalez, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And
In the race
it
for
wasn't
DA.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see. It was Steve Allison not in the running. Do Democrats try and take some of those Steve Allison votes? I mean, I don't want to get the cart ahead of the horse here, but it would seem that there might be some moderates that Democrats could pick off in that district.
I mean, to be fair, right? Democrats are like, great, I hope LaHood gets it, because if that's the referendum, then let that be the referendum at this point. Steve Allison would have been much harder to take that seat from him, and I don't know about it now.
It's still going to be very tough for a D to win in that, but no doubt Laurel will be getting a lot more votes than normally would be gotten out of that.
This is on the Democratic side, by the way, in that race.
Well, let's
You can
talk
see
about
Laurel
this as
Jordan
well.
Swift.
Let's talk about this as well.
Yeah.
Remember, this used to be Joe Strauss's district.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? And Joe Strauss was a leader for so long in that district that Democrats were voting Republican in that district for a long time, right? And so when Steve Allison won the race against Selena Montoya, that's more of, hey, we have Steve right now. He's may not be what we're looking for, but he's not Democrat, so let's get Steve. And I always felt like Steve was a placeholder until like a Mark White or someone else decided to kind of really step in and run. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that. One thing I know we haven't gotten this race yet, but Grant Moody, remember, he was appointed. He wasn't elected by
That's right.
the
Yes.
voters.
This is his first real race.
This is the first real race and the first real opportunity for the voters, for the neighborhoods to really say, hey, this is who we want to lead us.
What are those numbers showing? The Moody.
He was
He's
just
up.
above 50.
Yeah, he's up.
Moody's above 50.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to bring in
Yeah.
Judge Peter Sakai now. Or as I joked with him the last time he was on here, I called him Judge. Peter Sakai.
Judge squared.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you.
hang out with this guy?
I know he does. Thank you for hanging out.
Way
I'm going to
too
give you your
much.
own microphone.
Oh,
See, that's what
to hold
happens
it
when
and
you become
everything.
Bear County Judge.
Well, thank you. I'm indeed privileged tonight.
So talk about your reaction to this election and what you have seen so far and the turnout.
Well, obviously, the turnout is abysmal, and that's bothersome to me as an elected official, the county judge. I have been putting out a message, especially to the younger generation. I've been speaking to schools and at events, encouraging our young folks to go vote. And we'll have to break down the demographics, but it doesn't look like they came to go vote. And much like my last election, the good old senior vote is a dependable vote. And it appears tonight that most elections are not going to be an upset. I understand that Representative Allison is behind.
Yes.
And I'm sad to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch, and we've talked about the big story in this race. There are two guys that aren't even on the ballot, Greg Abbott and Attorney General. What are your thoughts about that influence in these races?
Well, obviously, that is on the R side of the business, so to speak.
Yes.
I'm on the D side, so it's what bothers me was the tone, was the images, which was the negativity. When I ran, there was a lot of negative campaigning for which I did not respond to, and I prevailed. And I got through a Democratic primary, got through a general election, and so it bothers me to see that negative campaign to the tone that I saw and the money spent in these particular races are very troubling.
You've
Are
seen,
troubling to me at least.
yeah, Myra, I'll let you go.
Well, I think, looking at as long as you have been involved in, serving elected office, have you, can you recall a time when we have seen an influence of people that aren't at all involved in the race? They're not on the ballot whatsoever, but they're very much helping determine the outcome.
I'm sure Commissioner Wolf's been here a lot longer than I, or perhaps just as long, but no, I have never seen this.
Yeah.
I've never seen the amount of money coming in. I mean, obviously, we had a little situation with what they call the dark ads, dark money comes in. No, this was all out in front.
Yeah.
There were the governor and the attorney general very involved in this from the Austin level. I just truly believe, at least from a commissioner's court and perhaps even city council, what we need to do is to stay focused at the local level. So, the voters have spoken, and we'll still see the results as they come in. Who knows who will finally prevail, but yeah, that one particular race, Representative Allison's race, is troubling.
And part of the local effort is getting people who live here to actually vote. And we talk about this every single election, that turnout is terrible and it gets worse. So I just, and Molly's over there chomping at the bit to weigh in on this, and I
Yeah.
promise we'll talk
obviously,
about it, but
I
efforts
think
to do that.
That's what negative campaigning does. I think it suppresses the
You think
vote.
it's a turnoff?
It's a turnoff. So each candidate or elected official has to make a calculated decision. Are you going to respond in kind? Do you feel obligated to respond? Do you have to respond? And I think my race 2 years ago showed you don't have to respond. The people know who you are. The people, let me tell you, the voters are savvy. But unfortunately, the partisanship and the polarization of the vote obviously is still very real. And it affects local races.
I want to talk about your position and the fact that you're just, you've got to work with the county commissioners, and Commissioner Clay Flores and Commissioner Moody are up for re-election tonight. Are you concerned at all that the complexion of the commissioners' court could change down the road?
It looks like from the early results, Commissioner Moody is, at least as I understand, leading for the early vote.
52%, I believe.
52%, even though that's a close margin. typically the early vote usually dictates the results.
Yeah.
So I'd be shocked to see anything turn around on that. I understand that Commissioner Clay Flores is leading and is close to getting perhaps to a 50% vote, which she may do. What that tells me is Commissioner's Court is stable.
Yeah.
Even though both races involve negative campaigning, but obviously perhaps not at the level as some of the other races. And I'll be real blunt, as county judge, I really like working with both commissioners. I'm hoping they return.
Interesting,
what I was
though,
curious about.
the interest in running in the Precinct 1 race, because that's a race with 6 candidates on the ballot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who were vying for that. Does that say anything to you?
Well, I've been very involved with Southside races going all the way back to the late Congressman Freight. That's a war zone sometimes.
Yeah.
And this race really, it perhaps didn't have that level of intensity that I've seen in the past elections. But in Southside, a lot of the elections are based on family relationships and who's related to who. And so things can get very personal. And when you sometimes upset people in the Southside, their response is to run against you.
Personal but passionate. If
They're
you've got 5 people who want to run it against an
That's
incumbent,
right.
you know.
And so if Commissioner Clay Flores prevails, especially without a runoff, I think that's an impressive win. Very impressive win.
I want to turn it over to the panel to let them ask you some questions, but before I do that, what has been the biggest challenge for you so far as county judge?
Challenging the status quo, asking staff and everybody who deals business with Commissioner's Court, can we do things differently? Can we be more effective? Can we be more efficient? Can we use taxpayer money in a more effective way? I'm very focused on public safety, public health, and economic development. Just kind of bread and butter issues.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe Commissioner's Court and local government should always stay focused on.
All right, I'm gonna let your power panel ask them questions. Molly, I'll let you go first.
No, he was ready.
All right, Kevin, I'll let you go first.
I just want to say, Judge, it's great sitting over here rather than sitting up there.
I'm sweating away right now.
Well, it's because you're facing the power panel. That's probably why it is.
We're ready.
Yeah.
We're like ready.
Yeah.
You know, look, I see your court and your colleagues really starting to gel, and I agree with you. I hope the 2 incumbents come out of this clean. The numbers look okay for Grant. They actually look okay for Rebecca. Now, she may end up in a runoff, but she's above that 45 piece, just under 50 right now, and she could still win it outright. But I'd like to see the folks that are still there work with you some more.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Commissioner Wolf, you know that county government really is nuts and bolts, right?
Yeah.
We run law enforcement through the sheriff. We run the courthouse through the judges. We run University Hospital District and provide medical care, indigent care. And so we run the elections department. And so there are really key cogs to county government that make our local community strong and vibrant. And I've got to make sure that in my 2 years now, in my second year, I supported law enforcement. I made sure we raised the pay raises for deputies, constables. Back when you were there, those were just hot political issues that were debated on the dais.
Yeah.
And I've kind of just said, no, either we're committed to public safety, public health, and economic development, or you're not.
Yep.
And I find my commissioners fully supportive of what I'm doing. So I got 2 more years, and then it'll be my turn. And then I want to be able to sit over there.
Yeah, okay. Are you saying you're not going to run for re-election?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you're.
That's what I heard.
I thought maybe you were making an announcement.
I want to make it real clear. I am running for re-election.
Okay, all right.
All those that have that idea thinking, put it away, or else you're going to see me on the ballot.
Here's a commitment I'll make to you: is when that time comes, I will gladly.
Yeah, I just want to be able to sit over there.
Yeah, that's what I said. I'd gladly do that. Molly.
I have so many things that I want to address that aren't questions, but I want to start with a question. We can talk all the other things later when you're gone, and then you don't have to rebut. You talked about voter turnout and specifically that the county is responsible for our elections department, and I'm curious, based on the fact that you do run our elections department, that you're talking about young people turning out to vote, what does the county do to help make elections easier for young folks in our county?
Great question, and obviously, as you know, the elections administrator position has been a regular topic and often is discussed in the court. I am confident that what's going to happen after this election and the general election, we're going to get a path of succession for our elections administrator. The person I'm looking for, Molly, is someone that knows how to use technology, how to activate and to get volunteers, whether they're seniors or kids in high school that can participate. And what that means is it has to have somebody that has the bandwidth, so to speak, to be able to connect with these groups. And so I'm confident that Jackie Callahan is running a great election. I'm sure there's going to be some criticism of some of the decisions she's made, but I am looking forward to focusing. And in fact, this past year we had our first election board meeting.
Right.
So that's the reason why I have a sense of that we're going to perhaps see a change coming up.
I do want to be very clear. Like, Jackie Callahan's job is not one that I envy at all, particularly right now, particularly after the 2020 election. So I just am curious,
It's a
right?
tough
If
job,
that's
and Commissioner Wood,
right.
you've been there when you've had to make changes with the elections administrator. So it is crucial that whoever succeeds Jackie has the level of integrity that Jackie has. But I'm going to be looking for somebody who knows how to manipulate the technology and the connections, especially with our younger generation. We have to have them involved.
Okay.
Us seniors are getting up in age.
And that's kind of, Judge, that was kind of the direction I was going to go. Obviously, this is one of the most important things we want is turnout for representation's sake. But until that time happens, we have another election coming up, right? And so what is it in the immediate future that you think that you, in collaboration with the elections department, can do in terms of outreach, in terms of communication, in terms of marketing to help, so we don't have a repeat of today in November?
Well, I think as we do, we're going to have to sit back and analyze and run the demographics. And there's the consultants and those experts that are going to break down who voted. And I'm sure we're going to see that the vote was probably from the senior population, the older population. And we're going to have to see where those votes came from. And so we're going to have a concentrated effort to connect with the younger generation. But it's going to be incumbent on the office holder and the candidates to put a message. I'm going to be real blunt. From the top at Washington, D.C. to Austin to local, it's obviously people are disengaged because of the message. And that's the reason why, for me, my message is what is possible? What's positive? What can we do together to collaborate and make a difference? And I hope that all elected officials can maintain that type of conversation, because that's what's going to bring people back. The mass of people to come vote are because they want to see something happen. They want change. We saw that with President Obama, how many terms ago? He brought the votes out. Unfortunately, it looks like for the presidential race, which I'm not going to touch at all, but I will say this.
Okay.
I don't know.
How'd you know that was the next question I was going to ask?
I don't know what the fall turnout will be.
Yeah.
I mean,
interesting to see.
We'll see what motivates people.
Let me defend the county a little bit and the responsibility of the election judge and the court in regards to encouraging people to vote. I think their job, and I think they're doing well at this, is making sure that there are opportunities to vote. But I do not think it's their job to make you have responsibility to go and vote. So when I look at the totals today, the average age statewide of early voter in the Democratic Party, 61. In the Republican Party, 62.
Yeah.
4% of all the early vote was 30 and under. All right, so there's no way a county government or any level of government can sit there and tell you, hey, your biggest power. I used to give high school classes about this. The one thing you can do is go exercise your right to vote.
Absolutely.
And if you don't take the responsibility to do that, it drives me crazy. She wants to disagree.
Yeah, I think we got a disagreement here. Yeah.
I just want to say we can turn to individual responsibility when we know that voting is a system that makes you deal with other systems. So if the website doesn't work, or if I don't have access to the internet, which we know is a major problem in Bexar County, or if I don't have the means by which to get there on transportation, we know that public transit is also a challenge that the county also oversees. So all I'm saying is that there is a burden of responsibility that should be on institutions to eliminate the barriers for individuals. Does that also mean as an individual I need to then understand or what? Yes, but we should be absolutely asking our institutions to bear the burden of that more than any individual.
I'd agree with you if the numbers proved out, but the same problem has existed ever since I've been able to vote.
That's not exactly true.
Ever since I've been able to vote.
Literally, 2020, we had 65% voter turnout. We saw one of the highest young voter registered turnouts in history in Bexar County. So it's
So
not.
if they could do it then, why didn't they do it now?
But that's
where
not about the individual.
That's maybe where we get back to the top of the ticket.
Wait a
and,
minute about
and
it.
how do you
I'm going to
energize?
jump in and say that Molly's spot on.
Thank you, sir.
She's spot on because, one,
I
can tell
win.
you, the technology.
Who's a judge?
The technology at the county is antiquated. We're still running the same system that when Commissioner Wolf. Now, we're in the midst of making those transitions. And I will tell you, it's a slow process because the way technology is.
And
So-
bureaucracy and everything.
And what I would say that you're spot on is how you connect with the young person. It's not through, unfortunately, I don't know if it's through TV
No, I
or
don't know if
radio.
it-
Well,
Yeah,
we
You
know,
and
well,
it's
we
not
know where
to-
it's
it's
at.
not
Or it's
to
through
diminish-
live streams
I don't
like
want
we're
to
doing
bring
that.
your
Yeah,
ad
yeah,
rates down.
yeah.
But I'm just saying, you
Social
have to
media.
connect through social
Right.
media.
Social
Yes.
media.
Right.
Absolutely.
And one
Which
of the
is
things,
what we're doing right now.
One of the things I've told the workforce people who, and I tell the community who are looking for the labor, young people, the restaurants, the hotels, they're like, where's the labor? And I said, if you're not connecting them with social media, you ain't got them. The sign in the window, help wanted, doesn't bring any kid in to go work.
Yep.
You've got to have a message through social media. So Molly, you're spot on. Does that validate?
And that's
Molly
more of where
Cox?
I was going with
it
it.
does.
There's things that we can do in the interim
Yes.
to pivot to in a few months that can make a little bit of tweaks. Not saying we're going to turn the Titanic around. Well, it ain't, but not going to turn the Titanic around.
I used Titanic, and they said, no, Judge, use aircraft carrier.
Yeah, it's
there
hard to
you go.
turn that ship around, but there's things we can do to head down that direction. So,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
are you throwing your name in the ring for the next Bexar County Elections Administrator? Is that what I
No, I don't want to do Jackie's job. No, you need somebody younger
I'm
than me.
looking at her.
I know, see?
I'm looking at her.
All I'm saying is, no, because I curse too frequently. But B,
That's okay.
but B, I do think that there's a conversation to be had that is the institution of Bexar County ready to make the adjustments that need to happen in order for others to figure out. And to be fair, you're doing some great work on digital inclusion. We're talking about public transit shifts and moves, right? I understand infrastructure is happening. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about voter turnout, that it's not just an individual responsibility after years and years and years, and even more recent voter restrictions. I mean, we're seeing that all over the place. So things like making super precincts was such a brilliant move, and you saw the immediate shift in voter turnout. When you were allowed to go anywhere to vote, boom, voter turnout shot up in 2019. And it's just reducing barriers.
I'm going to throw this
And
shade
why
at
hasn't that sustained itself?
It has!
Commissioner Wolf. I'm not throwing shade at you, but you know county government's an extension of the state.
Yep.
So we got to do what we're told to do, and I do not see that type of vision and bringing us to the current
That I will agree with.
connection with our young people.
Right.
So what we need, and that's one of the issues why the state legislature is such an important place.
Yes,
And that's the
absolutely.
reason why I hate seeing good people lose.
Yeah.
And we want to get to some races for that very position. Judge Sakai, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. This was a
Thank
much
you.
livelier conversation.
Thank you for.
He said that he was out of order and I won. That's what happened, right?
I just appreciate.
what I heard.
I just appreciate Molly getting validated.
By a judge.
A judge.
I'm just saying, a judge said
judge
you're out of
judge.
order and I win.
Verdict for Molly.
Oh, okay. All right.
Just don't hold me in contempt and send me to jail. I'm okay. I'll be okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Great
Really
to
appreciate
see
it.
you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Made the first
Like we
move.
said, we've been following races locally
Yes.
and across the region. One of those races is in Uvalde, where our Lee Waldman is standing by right now at the Uvalde newspaper, where they have the tally board outside and they give the latest results. So, I mean, you're on top of it down there, Lee. Tell us what's happening down there in Uvalde.
I think this is one of the most beloved traditions here in Uvalde, having the whiteboards out as the newspaper staff comes out and fills out those numbers. You can see there's still a bit of a crowd here. It was a little bit larger earlier on, but people are anxiously reading these early voting numbers as they're coming in. We talked about some of those races we were following. That includes the race for sheriff. So coming over here, you can see our candidates here for sheriff. Ruben Nolasco, he is the incumbent leader, and he is ahead with those early voting numbers as they're coming in. A pretty significant lead there ahead of some of his counterparts who are running against him. Another race we're following, State Rep District 80, Don McLaughlin, the former mayor here in Uvalde. He said it was a no-brainer for him to join this race, and you can see the people in Uvalde heavily supporting their former mayor here ahead of some of his other competitors here. Constable, Precinct 1. This was another big race that we were following. Johnny Field, he is the incumbent here. Max Dorflinger going against him. Paul Wayne Moss Jr. going against him. He is our incumbent who is behind at this point. Max Dorflinger is pulling ahead. Now, I'm going to come back to why Johnny Field is significant and why this Constable Precinct 1 seat is very significant. But the other big race we're following is that Precinct 6. Emmanuel Zamora, our incumbent here, he is ahead of competitor Robert Moss. So why we're watching those races so significantly, the sheriff and both those constables, is because all three were responding to the Robb Elementary shooting on May 24th. All three were also named in that Department of Justice report. So that's why we're following these races so closely. And at this point, the people of Uvalde are backing those incumbents who were named in that report, aside for this Constable Precinct 1 race, where we're seeing Johnny Field fall behind to Max Dorflinger. Now, Max is also a first responder. He was with the Uvalde Police Department at the time, and he also responded to Robb Elementary on the day of the shooting. He came out and had his own statement that was released on his Facebook page, saying he'd got off a long shift and then heard about what was happening at the school on the radio, left his phone behind, and then responded to the school. All three of the incumbents for those races, for sheriff and both constables, they have been subjected to families of the victims and survivors asking them to step down rather, because of what was noted in the Department of Justice report. We're also expecting to hear more, because on Thursday, we're getting another report released by the city talking about what happened at Robb Elementary. But that's why those races are so significant here. But again, people are backing their incumbents. They're backing the guys who are already in office. We spoke to Noah Arona's father, Oscar. Noah is one of the survivors from Classroom 112. He was shot in the back. His dad said that he is hoping that the people of Uvalde change their mind and vote these people out of office. But as we're seeing with some of these early voting numbers, that's just not the case at this point. We're waiting until the staff from the Uvalde Leader News comes back out and gives us some more of those totals with what's going to happen Super Tuesday here in Uvalde County.
Lee, can Lee hear us? I want to ask her a question about some of these totals. You're talking about how some of these incumbents that were named in that report, that DOJ report that talked about the complete lack of action on May 24th, 2022. Some of these people are winning tonight. You have been in this community since that day, since the day of the shooting, with how you have seen the process of handling that tragedy, you know, how people have come together, how people have healed as much as they can in that time. Does that surprise you at all that these incumbents are winning so far?
It's not surprising because we saw the same kind of thing happen with past elections that we've covered. So we've been in this community covering what's happened here for the last almost 2 years now. We're coming up on that 2-year mark pretty soon. It's not surprising because we saw the Uvalde community back Governor Greg Abbott, vote him back overwhelmingly. We saw the Uvalde community vote back in some county commissioners, Mariano Vargas primarily, who was the acting Uvalde police chief on May 24th, who had to step down, was the only person from the city facing any kind of consequences for his action or lack thereof. Another person named on the DOJ report, but he was voted back as a county commissioner. This is not surprising. When we look at the mayoral race that just happened after Don McLaughlin stepped down, Cody Smith voted into office. He had previously served as a mayor here in this community, but Kim Rubio, Lexi's mom, she ran against him. Lexi, her life was taken on May 24th, but she lost that race overwhelmingly to Cody Smith. So it's not surprising what we're seeing happening here because it's happened in past elections since this tragedy happened in Uvalde, and we saw those 21 lives taken on May 24th, 2022. I know that there is the people who are most impacted by what happened, those survivors, the victims' families. They're the ones who really want that change, but it seems like this community as a whole does not want that change.
Yeah. Lee, stay with me for 1 second because, you know, you and I have been there before together, and yeah, we have seen this in the past where incumbents have won. And these are guys who are not only questioned for their inaction at Robb Elementary, they're not going on camera and answering questions either. So does Don McLaughlin fly in the face of that a little bit? Because he is a mayor. He was very outspoken during the whole thing, talked about even raising the age for automatic weapons, semi-automatic weapons, and yet he is winning overwhelmingly tonight. So he kind of seems to be the one that doesn't really fit into that particular category, correct?
I think that's exactly right. And, you know, Don McLaughlin has also gotten some pretty significant backing in this race. Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, backed him in the race. Governor Greg Abbott has backed him in this race. So he's gotten some pretty heavy endorsements when it comes to running for this state house seat. Now, again, that's like you mentioned, he as a mayor had said he would support raising the age to buy a semi-automatic weapon for those rifles from 18 to 21. Now, running for the state house seat, I don't know if he's faced that question. We plan on asking him that question tonight. He's already said he'll happily talk to us once we get some more of those numbers for those precincts coming in. He's been very, very vocal, but you had mentioned a lot of those other candidates who we've reached out to ask them for interviews, to ask them if they're planning on stepping down, to ask if any action is going to be taken because of that DOJ report coming out, and it's been essentially radio silence. One response we did get was from Emmanuel Zamora, who again is an incumbent in the lead tonight. We asked him if he'd like to do an interview or have a statement released. He just said that he would be here at the Uvalde Leader News because it's a beloved tradition in their community, and he was planning on watching the results as they came in. No answer to our interview question, but he did say that he would be here tonight, and we're keeping an eye out for him and would like to talk to him. So, Emmanuel Zamora, if you're watching this, any of the other incumbents, if you're watching this, we'd like to talk to you. We've been trying to talk to you for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Lee Waldman live in Uvalde tonight. Thank you, Lee.
All right, thank you, Lee. Let's go to some numbers that we have. I kind of like the whiteboard idea, though, after seeing some of the results come in slowly here. I'm going to do that next year. We're just going to do a whiteboard and forget all this fancy technology. I think we have the Steve Allison race that we're going to go to right now. This is with early voting numbers still. We do know that there was a turnout today. He's Allison trailing by less than 2,000 votes right now, but 54% for Mark LaHood, 40% for Steve Allison, 7% for Michael Champion. Will Mark LaHood win outright tonight? That is one of the big questions in this whole thing. Of course, Steve Allison targeted by Governor Greg Abbott.
Yeah, all over the school voucher issue. We had both LaHood and Allison on our air join us for our KSAT Q&A, and you know, Allison talked about how he has voted lockstep, as he said, with Governor Abbott on everything but school vouchers. So that certainly has been a huge factor in this race. Our power panel said earlier, based on the numbers we saw, it did not look good for Allison. It looks like that is still the trend so far tonight.
All right, another incumbent that is hoping to get to 50% and beyond is a county commissioner, county commissioner's race. Rebecca Clay Flores is the incumbent. She is standing by with our Patty Santos live right now from the Arizona Cafe. Patty, let's go to you.
Hey, yeah, it has been a long day for Commissioner Rebecca Clay Flores. Early numbers are showing you ahead. How does it feel?
Feels good. Feels good. We're just waiting for the final numbers.
Okay. Talk to me about what you feel you have accomplished for this district, for your precinct, specifically that you have accomplished in those years that you've been in office.
Yeah, I mean, so much. I think we brought better transparency to Commissioners Court. More people know about us as county commissioners. And, there's specific goals that I have fought for and advocated for. So I'm really proud about the new UHS Southside Hospital, the mental health program that I championed, $20 million countywide to pay for more therapists and social workers. Just things that I'm really proud of. Working with the sheriff to open a new Northwest Sheriff substation, so we make sure we take care of our precinct. We take care of voters.
And hopefully, do you think you might be going off to a runoff, or do you feel tonight will be the clincher?
Tonight's going to be the clincher. We're waiting for the final numbers. I'm excited.
And if you go on to be reelected, what are some of the goals specifically that you hope to accomplish that you've been hearing constituents want?
Well, we want to make sure we finish the things that we've started in the first my first term. But we definitely need a mental health facility in Bexar County, because it's not just about Bexar County residents. We also take in, we serve the rural communities as well. So that's something that's really lacking, more mental health forensic beds, not just for adults, but for our teenagers as well.
Yeah. What do you think has been the hardest part about doing this all over again? I know it's been an exhausting few weeks for you, but this second time around, has it been different for you?
Oh, it's definitely different. I had obviously a better funded campaign. I have a great campaign team who's back here. Block walking has been really fun. So a lot of the when I knock on doors, a lot of the constituents already knew me, already knew the things that I've been fighting for. So it's just a totally different feel.
There's been some that feel maybe you haven't been accessible enough. What, if any, changes will you be doing moving forward?
That's a lie. That was just something the opponents thought of because they couldn't find anything else to say. So that's inaccurate.
Moving forward, is there anything that you're going to change as far as being accessible to the community for those who feel that way?
I'm very accessible. It's just my opponents who feel that way.
All right. We'll wait for those numbers, and we'll stay here with the mariachi waiting at your watch party.
Thank you.
We'll send it back to you guys.
All right, Patty Santos live with Rebecca Clay Flores. Patty, thank you. Obviously, the incumbent in the Precinct 1 race, when Patty interviewed her a couple weeks ago, and then again tonight, she is adamant that criticism of her being inaccessible is incorrect. And this is how the numbers are shaping up tonight. 49% of the vote right now. This was a race with 6 total candidates in it, so a big question about that runoff.
Yeah, and she has roughly a 3,000 vote lead right now over Amanda Gonzalez. You heard her say, though, just moments ago, she thinks they're going to wrap it up tonight. She does not expect this to go to a runoff. I want to throw it to the power panel real quick. Your reaction to what you've heard from Rebecca Clay Flores tonight.
So, look, I'm someone who follows Rebecca. I mean, when I was running the PAC, she was the very first contribution we made. What I was explaining to Molly is representation matters. I'm going to start there.
Yeah.
When women's issues come across the table, when issues that affect minorities, voters, come across the table or constituents, it's important to have that person at the table that understands what women go through, what minorities go through, so they can add that context to a conversation, right? Not that they need to have their way, but it's there at the table, number one. Number two, she's done everything that she said she was going to do. There's no scandals. As far as her being accessible or not, that's not up to us to decide. It's up to her constituents and her funders, right? And for me is Rebecca is someone who, whether you're a constituent, whether you're the president or whoever you are, she's going to be who she is and she's going to say what she wants to say. It doesn't matter. Some people it rubs them the wrong way. And so what I'd say is sometimes, and Kevin knows, when you're out in public, when you're in front of those folks, you got to put on a mask sometimes. You got to smile, you got to kiss babies, even if you're sick, if you don't feel good, if you don't feel like talking to people. That's something she's gonna have to learn to do so she can win over some more folks. But I don't knock her for being authentic and being herself.
Yeah. I love her, and we differ very much in political philosophy.
Yeah.
And I love her because I never have to question where she is. You know, and she's not shy about telling you this is what I think, this is what I think, and this is what I'm going to do, and you can count on it. So I think she pulls it out tonight. I made that call earlier tonight that I think she wins it without a runoff. I think she's going.
She was also a favorite of your father,
Oh, yeah.
Am I correct in that?
That's
I mean,
true.
He was a big
That's
fan
true.
of Rebecca Clay Flores.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
There's something very specific about the fact that you've got this woman of color who unseated a long-time incumbent, like came out of nowhere, unseated a long-time incumbent, and then I understand she's only one term in, but who's running against her are another group of younger women of color. So she's also sort of opened the door to, hey, you could get on the commission.
I like that.
And I'm like, y'all, listen, we can talk about the fact that she picked up people, but I think that's partly because she's newer, let's figure that out, whatever. But I'm like, props to the fact that she is a woman who ran against 5 other people, is picking up nearly 50% of the vote, had basically paved the way for new, younger women of color to say, I think I could run for office.
I think it's a huge statement that she's at 49% with
That's
the
what- yeah.
number of opponents she has.
Yeah.
I mean, I just looked at the number of opponents and thought, this is going to a runoff. And the fact that she's at 49% to me is impressive in and of itself.
And if you look at the other campaigns, you know, although they loaned themselves money, that's a significant amount of money that they're using to obviously go garner votes. But I would say this is great for Rebecca, and I'd say if they don't do it now, good luck, because the longer you stay in that seat, the more entrenched you become.
Well, and I think that's why there are 5 people that are running, because they know it's now.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, now we want to go to our Daniela Ibarra. She is standing by on the northwest side. She's covering the race for District 123, District 23 rather. Tony Gonzalez is the incumbent here. He has been censured by his own party. Fellow Republicans not happy with some of the ways that he has voted. He's facing an opponent tonight we have certainly seen run a lot of ads on our airwaves. Daniela, what's your read out there on how they're feeling about the numbers so far?
So Myra, we've actually been working to get a hold of Tony Gonzalez. We were told that they weren't having a watch party and that the congressman is out about in his district, which, like you said earlier, it is a huge span of the state. It goes from El Paso all the way to the west side of San Antonio. And like you mentioned, this race is crowded, especially on the Republican side. Tony Gonzalez is the incumbent, but he's being challenged by Julie Clark, who was at the time the head of the Medina County Republican Party, which started that measure to censure Tony Gonzalez, and that's because of some of the votes that he's taken that they say clash with what the Republican Party stands for. Now, right now, he has 50% of the vote, and right behind him, or I should say behind him, is Brandon Herrera, who considers himself a social media activist. He considers himself a Second Amendment activist, and he has 20% of the vote. And like I said, we're working on getting a hold of Tony Gonzalez right now, but so far we haven't had any luck.
All right, Daniela, thank you. We will wait and see what his reaction is once we can finally get it. But that is a district that is historically noted for turnover. I mean, it is one where you see a lot of people come and go. There's so much money put into that district, into these races, and it's one of the biggest in the country.
Yeah, thank you, Daniela. Let's see if we can put up some of those numbers right now from that race. And here is representative for 23 on the Democratic side, I believe is what we had up there. This is the Republican side. Here we have Tony Gonzalez with 49% of the vote, Brandon Herrera at 20, and Julie Clark at 14. What were you going to say, Myra?
Well, I wanted to see if John Taylor, what did you call him, our power panel pro tem?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's waiting in the wings. And I know that you've been looking at a lot of stuff tonight, reacting to all kinds of things.
He's got his own mic. Okay. Wow, he's moved up even farther.
If you have any thoughts on the 23 race.
23 race right now, Congressman Gonzalez, if he doesn't do much more here, maybe in a runoff.
Yeah.
It looks like against Brandon Herrera, which means that one ought to get really interesting really quick because of the money that's involved and Trump that's involved.
Yeah.
There's some fascinating numbers coming in for state representative races. 2 things stand out. 1, Dade Phelan's in huge trouble now, the speaker. 2, if you look at the number of state house Republican incumbents that either were targeted by Greg Abbott or by Ken Paxton, it's now up to 13 that are behind right now. Out of the roughly 25 or so that they targeted.
Wow.
You get a shift of roughly 8 of these seats Vouchers is now on the table in the House in spring of 25.
So we talked about, before we got to look at the numbers, that this was, you thought, likely a test of the popularity of Governor Abbott. Dade Phelan is somebody that has butted heads with Abbott. He's butted heads with Paxton. He's butted heads with Dan Patrick. So you feel like they're winning this popularity
Right now they're
contest
winning
tonight?
it. They're winning it, looks like statewide for a lot of these races.
Does that
I guess we'll see. The numbers still aren't in, obviously, everywhere. And, you know, some elections, let's be honest, it takes longer in some areas than others.
Absolutely. Does this tell us anything about the Republican Party tonight?
It tells us it's very much Trumpified, for want of a better term. It's definitely a party that is, at least statewide, is Greg Abbott's party as much as it is anybody else's. I mean, the guy's been elected 3 times in landslides. He's not going away, and he's trying to make his mark.
And the power of the border as an
doesn't
issue.
hurt right now. It absolutely doesn't hurt for Republicans at all.
Is there an element of audition here for the vice president position? And all
He
of
might
this?
think so. I'm not sure if Trump actually believes that, what he told him the other day at the border, but you know, that's Donald Trump. But that said, it never hurts for Greg Abbott to do that, obviously. Not necessarily thinking about 24, but perhaps thinking about 28 instead.
The long game.
The long game.
I'm not sure Greg Abbott wants to be vice president.
No,
but
I don't think he does
would
either.
like to be under consideration.
Exactly.
That's for sure. John Taylor, by the way, chair of the Geography and Political Science Department at UTSA.
I got a
Appreciate you
question
crunching
for
the
John.
numbers. Yes,
I got a question.
let's
you know, I'm a huge believer that history repeats itself.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, my time in politics, whether I wanted it to or not, goes all the way back to when I was 5. You know, when Dad was first elected to the House of Representatives, there were no Republicans in the state of Texas.
Exactly.
There were
Very
yellow
few.
dogs and there were blue dogs. There were, you know, moderates and liberals, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, and over time, as a matter of fact, if I got my dates right, a very strong Republican governor, Perry, used to be a Democrat that served with my dad.
He used to be a Democrat.
So, what I may see happening here to the Republican Party is the beginning of the end.
Funny you say that. I've actually said that in my Texas politics class before.
Okay.
That it's the idea that what comes around goes around.
Yeah.
Or to quote from somebody else, it's all happened before and it will happen again.
Yeah.
And in this case, don't forget, people lived here, and I'll face the screen directly to teach you for a minute here. If you've lived in the state long enough, you remember when Democrats were in charge of everything. And in the 1970s and 80s, Bill Clements gets elected. All of a sudden, the Reagan Revolution takes place, and we start to shift from blue to purple and then red by the 1990s and 2000s. And now we're seeing the same kind of infighting we saw in the Democratic Party in the 1970s and 80s.
That's right.
So be careful what you wish for, Republicans. You may be repeating what Democrats did 40 years ago.
All right, forget pro tem. You're now the professor. He's the professor.
Hey, I just want you to know I queued him up for it.
I know. I'm giving
Power panel
you
professor.
right here.
Power panel professor.
I'm not like Judge Sakai waiting on promoting Molly. I'm doing it right now.
I just, yeah.
So one thing that I wanted to talk about is, you know, obviously you can see, I think CD23 has been a polarizing district for a long time, but you don't see the influence as much in that race, even with the money thrown into the opponent versus a 121 where that's majority Republican district, right? So you can, I mean, when Gina Ortiz-Jones ran in that race, you can honestly say that's like almost a 50-50 type of deal.
Redistricting happened.
It's been redistricted since that to be a little bit more Republican.
But you can see how the influence is much stronger in a 121. Obviously, there's more territory, but then you would think, okay, that influence in that district would be more, but it hasn't affected.
Although I got to
Tony.
say, Brandon Herrera's money obviously played a role, and they play a role in getting him to a runoff tonight.
Well, there you go. There you go. I would take that. Yeah.
Molly?
I got my master's degree at UTSA. I feel pretty smart.
Exactly. From my department, thank you.
And from that department,
Is
so you
there
know.
anybody that's not reaffirming Molly's? I mean, she wears the Dolly T-shirt to kiss up to Myra.
Listen,
Now she's wearing. I mean,
We didn't even call each other. We just matched. Because we're BFF.
all right. Well, I think we do have numbers though on the Kemple Schoolcraft.
Yes.
Schoolcraft,
one.
Schoolcraft is ahead right now.
Yeah, there it is.
That's,
49% to 45%. This is interesting, and this goes to a runoff. But these are very early, just 12% reporting. But if you're John Kemple and you see Schoolcraft at 49%, you're hoping that either you get some more votes or maybe Greg Switzer gets some more votes and takes it down below 50%.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this is another race that the governor came out strongly in favor
specifically
of school
targeted. In
craft.
fact, Greg Abbott, commercials on your TV station, thank you, where he's looking at the camera saying, John Kemple, I don't trust him. He lied to me. I mean, literally that kind of approach.
Yeah.
And it's paid off so far.
Says he couldn't trust him on the border.
Yeah,
Never
school
school
vouchers.
vouchers on a conversation.
Just on the border.
On the issue of
Schoolcraft didn't even need a photo.
No.
He didn't even give us a photo. Yeah, well, we have a photo of him, but the last time he was in office, it was black and white. So, no, I don't. That's not true. It was a long time ago, though, when he was actually in the State House.
Illustration.
That's another money game one, though. You're talking between both sides, probably $1 million have been spent. Ridiculous amount of money in that district.
In a primary.
In a primary.
In a primary.
Well, that's my question. Let me be the cynic here for a second.
Okay.
And say, in all these races, you are seeing money win, whether it's Colin Allred, whether it's
That's
Schoolcraft, whether it's you're
that's
seeing
primary,
money win.
In general, yes.
So
Well, that's not cynical. That's just truth. Money wins.
Especially in this
I
state.
would, I would like to at a certain point think maybe ideas and things like that could win.
Here's the reason why money wins. When you have unlimited amount of resources, you're able to acquire the most sophisticated voter outreach programs that allows you to reach more voters. And like to Kevin mentioned earlier, when you don't have that much money, you're going to go after the ones that are going to vote. In the last 4 races, they vote every single time. You know they're going to vote. You're going to use those guys as volunteers. And then you're going to go to the last 4 of 3 and the 3 of 3. Then not too many campaigns ever get out to the last 2 of the people who voted the last 2 out of 4 races. Because very rarely you can get out. Beto had so much money that he was going after Republican voters. And so that's why money is so important, because you can't reach the voters you need to reach to get them to vote for you or volunteer for the campaign.
In fact, one number that stood out was 4 years ago, about roughly $42 million was raised and spent for various races in Texas.
Man, how many teachers
primaries.
could get a raise with
now
that?
up to over 80 million.
Double that.
Double that.
Double.
In 4 years.
So, at the same time, okay, so follow me here on this line of thinking.
Okay.
If we're seeing the GOP in particular move further away from the middle, you are getting further away from being inclusive. Fewer people are going to want to how do you attract voters, like we just talked about earlier? How do you get people to want to buy what you're selling when, if you're on the Republican side or the Democratic side, you're only appealing to who is on the margins?
Yeah, but with fervor, right? So with fervor, people are voting for Trump. With fervor, people are voting for Greg Abbott. With fervor, people are voting for the Attorney General. This sort of fringe, particularly in primaries, let's be clear, regular voters don't go out in, like the people who show up for your presidential election in a general year aren't necessarily going to show up to a primary. The amount of conversations that I've had just, hey, a primary is happening and you select which ballot you want to vote for was sort of shocking. And to even think about it from a voter turnout perspective, we're going to look at about 13-14% voter turnout this year for what we've got right now, where we were at 22%, nearly 23% in 2020. We saw, again, the largest turnout in our history in 2020 for the presidential election. But what the primary typically tilts towards fringe or the hardcore voter, right? So it's not necessarily in the primary that we should be having the conversation about, like, hey, as we move further and further, it's really in the general election. And what we're seeing right now is that fervor's for real. Like, they are very serious about it.
And I think the word that rings in my ear is primary. And a primary race is dramatically different than a general election race. And what has happened, it's much worse on the Republican side, but it's also happening on the Democratic side, is you're having the extremes control the primaries. And so if you happen to be a moderate, if you happen to be rational, for want of a better term, you can't make it through a primary. You get killed in the process.
Let's jump a step further here. Republicans are talking about creating closed primaries.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
You want to make it even more extreme.
Yes.
There you are.
Yeah.
Well, clearly that's part of the plan.
It is.
I mean, I think that's part of the plan is they want I won't say extreme, I'll say their base.
Okay, base.
They want their base.
Well, but I do think it's extreme. I don't think necessarily it's the base, right? So that's the challenge is right now extremists on the Republican side who also happen to control the government, quite frankly, at our state level, and they're the ones who are making these like voter turnout more restrictive. We're looking at closed primaries. We're pouring millions of dollars into primaries in an effort to get people to talk about school vouchers, which is truly not an issue. It is literally a non-issue. Yeah. And that's the conversation that we're having. So I do think that there is this like, what happens next? And rather than relying, I think, on the infighting to ultimately shift us back or to shift us away, it now becomes a what do we do next?
Well, that's what I mean. I think that is the base.
Oh, you're saying now.
That's the base now.
Well,
I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying you can describe them any way you want to.
Yeah.
But that's the Republican base.
That's
where the power is.
Yep.
That's where the voters are coming from, especially in a primary. But that's the Republican base. It looks much different than maybe it did.
And this is something that Judge Sakai brought up about how they're an extension of the state.
Right.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And how, well, there's only so much we can do because they tell us what to do.
Right.
Right. And so when you start going down that road, I'm not saying Judge Sakai is not a great leader, right? But that's where you need to have a little bit of pushback, show a little bit more grit, and saying, yeah, I hear you, but this is not right. Right, and when we're talking about an equality conversation, we're talking about an equity access to all these things. We need those folks that are at the crossroads of who controls what to be able to push back when necessary.
The voters here don't know this. Most people don't know this. So when you look at a city council and you look at a commissioner's court, you're really looking at two different branches of government.
Yeah.
Yes. Council is the legislative branch. Court is much more the executive branch. They are the implementation arm of state law. And so it does, you can get up there and you can shout at the rain. You can say, I don't think this is right, I don't think we should do this, but we talked about the election judge. The court doesn't hire the election judge, okay? A court is a piece of the body that hires the election judge, and guess what? That election judge doesn't report to the court, they report the state. Yeah. And so it becomes, I'm not trying to make excuses for county government, it's just a fact of what you can and can't do. You can use it as a bully pulpit. And I know I have. I know, the preceding judge did a number of times. I know this judge will too. But to really make the change, to flip a switch, to make a policy, to those types of things, you can't do it.
Yeah, government's not exactly easy to understand.
No, it's not.
I don't think it was built. I don't think it was built to understand. I think it was
right.
Yeah. Let's go to Garrett Berger. I believe he is with the Grant Moody campaign, and we were talking about Republicans. Grant Moody was one of those candidates that had a candidate who was running to his right. So let's go live now to Garrett Berger at the Grant Moody campaign. Garrett.
Now, Grant Moody won a special election back in November 2022 to fill the unexpired term left over by Trish DeBerry. Now, he got a fast track to that ticket because DeBerry, because of the timing of when she left to run for county judge, they couldn't hold primaries. Instead, the local parties appointed their candidates. But now, with a full term at stake, Grant Moody is facing a full campaign, including a primary. We're at his watch party right now. We're going to give you the view. Right now, results are looking rosy for Grant Moody. He has not yet commented. His campaign says they want to wait until they've got more of the vote in from today before they say anything. But Moody is a former active duty Marine F-18 pilot. He's held various leadership roles at USAA and Valero. Now, representing the northern portion of Bexar County, he's currently the lone Republican on the 5-member commissioner's court, and he's pointed to new property tax exemption and more law enforcement officers in the county budget, as things he's still been able to accomplish. Now, his opponent, Chris Schuhart, owns a trucking company he started in his 20s. He's trying to position himself as the more conservative option to Moody, whom he's accused of voting with his Democratic colleagues most of the time. Moody has responded that most votes in county government are nonpartisan. Now, on the Democrat side, Susan Corbell's running unopposed. She owns a market research firm and lost the special election to Moody back in 2022. We don't yet know who's going to be facing her on the Republican side of the ticket, but we do know that will be their opponent. At this point, as I said, the mood here at the Moody camp pretty high. They seem to be anticipating a victory, but no one wants to jinx it quite yet. Live at the Moody campaign, I'm Garrett Berger, KSAT 12 News.
First time actually running for this seat, as Garrett mentioned. Here's a look at those numbers. Grant Moody, this is why they're feeling positive so far at that campaign tonight. 52%, Chris Schuhart with 48%.
And why they're not declaring victory yet is because there's just early voting right now, or all the numbers that we have in. But that's a good start for Grant Moody. And you know, as you look at that, Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, this is your old district.
Yes.
Your insights into what you see in those numbers.
So you always want to be after early vote if you're the incumbent. Actually, if you're the candidate, period. If you hit 54% after early vote, that's sort of your break piece. Okay. Nobody's probably going to catch you. Okay. He's within the margin there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's worrisome. You know, I think he still pulls it out. I think there's enough rational thought. I mean, look, I've known Grant for a good while now. He is uber conservative. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, he is a true fiscal conservative. Okay. You know, I don't know how you get right, at least in govern.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Grant's going to pull it out, but I'll tell you what could be interesting though. Say he doesn't. You might have for the first time in a very long time a Democratic nominee who is no slouch. You know, if things turn at that national level, you could have a Democrat running Precinct 3 to make it an actual fight.
Well, if I remember right, Trish DeBerry's last campaign, the Democrat did fairly well in that race.
That's right. And don't forget that Chris Schuhart ran for mayor and got 22% of the vote just this last election. Against Ron Nierenberg.
Right. Okay.
So I'm like, the guy's not new to politics, and he's clearly running on a far right or right.
Well, didn't he also run for the state house?
He has. He's run for a number of things.
Okay.
But this is a guy who's never voted in the Republican primary. Schuhart, right. So I'm a Republican, except I don't vote in Republican primaries. No, this is something different.
Yeah. But that's certainly, I understand now after looking at those numbers why they're optimistic at the Moody campaign, but they're also not declaring victory.
Well, like I said earlier, this is the first time Grant have taken votes from his community, from his constituents. And so as Grant, you have to be excited about that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And again, we're looking at a top of the folks who are coming out to vote right now are fervently voting for Donald Trump. So they're also just looking down and saying, who is like Trump, right? Who can be the most MAGA of the MAGAs? I don't know what you say. I'm like, who's the Trumpiest of Trumpies?
She doesn't want to say it.
I'm like, who's the Trumpiest of Trumpies? I don't know. But that's like literally how it's happening, which you can see across the board.
Yeah. You don't know how to say it because you've never said it before.
I was like, I don't like it. I don't like saying it.
Speaking of, let's take a look at how the presidential race is stacked up here in the state of Texas. No surprise here, Donald Trump with 76% of the vote. And then on the Democratic side, we've got
91.
That's in Bexar County.
Okay, Bexar County here, 72% here locally for Donald Trump, the former president. And then Joe Biden here, state level, 87% of the vote. Take a look at Bexar County as well. A similar story there tonight.
Is there anything to read in these numbers that we see on a presidential?
The only thing I read is Nikki's playing for 4 years.
Yeah.
So
that's why she's not dropping out.
That's why she's not dropping out.
Or really hoping the indictment goes through before. And then she's like, well, I have the most. Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that makes sense to me, that somebody of her caliber and ability, why would you stay in a race like this? You stay in a race like this so you're the front runner for years.
But this could also hurt her because they could feel, well, if Trump doesn't win, it's your fault. And so we're not going to support you when it's your turn. So You can turn it around and say that too.
Yeah, I don't know. You Democrats better get on the horse quick here, because it ain't looking good for you
That's
right
my
now.
question right now. What are you reading from the Democrats?
Well, speaking of Democrats, I want to listen to the State of the Union speech by
Yes,
Biden
Thursday.
and hear how these primary elections
Right.
either change or shape what he says or what the message is.
Which
for
we know is already
Democrats.
happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm interested in watching. But
What particular issues do you think he needs to change or shift on?
well, we can't even get down to the issues that really matter.
Right.
So, but the ones that everyone talks about, I think he needs to address Israel and Gaza. He needs to address that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I would say, I know that's not what you meant, but I do want to make sure that we are very serious about language. Of course they matter, which is why we're having the conversation around why young people are not coming out to vote, who are on social media and watching what's happening in Gaza and then pushing very hard for a movement to say we're not committed, right?
Right. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
yeah.
for giving me cover there. Thank you. Also, the border issue.
Yeah.
You know, I think people are starting to realize that Democrats care about the border more than they thought we do, and about fixing that. Let's not talk about invasions. Like, let's figure out who we need to help them, and let's figure out a path for people to come into this country legally where they can work and have a great quality of life like we all enjoy. You know, but I think we can't even get to that conversation because of the fire and brimstone that's coming from the West. Yeah.
That's the biggest thing, is how do you even get to that conversation?
I think the
though?
number one thing is the border, and it's two separate issues that are linked. One's border security, one's immigration.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think where the Democrats are feeling it, in that, you know, not just about the, oh yes, we want to do the good thing and work on immigration, but they're feeling the border security piece too. And God, I hate to say this, but part of the reason for that is some of the stuff that Abbott's done in regards to, hey, I'm shipping them out of Texas, okay? You want them, you take them and figure out how to do it. And that's putting a lot of pressure on Democratic states and Democratic electeds to say, oh, crap.
I know I'm not
this is a bigger problem
Steve.
than I thought.
I know I'm not Steve, but I also want to ask, there was a bipartisan border bill presented.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
That is what I call doing the job.
Yeah.
And that's you know what we were talking about, why I use the word I'm disgusted, because our elected
did it again. You said it
officials-
again.
I did, didn't I? Our elected officials are not doing the job. They were so close to being able to do the job.
And Republicans could take credit for that.
Yes.
Look, we pushed them to.
Not even just take credit. It was so conservative, to be fair. A bipartisan bill that was so far, like so much more conservative than it ever should be, coming from a Democratic administration. And then instead of saying, yes, okay, we'll go ahead and pass that, they said, let's instead impeach the Homeland Security guy.
But also, what happened before they decided not to vote on that? To your point, people going out and saying we're choosing Trump on the Republican side. You had Trump saying,
absolutely, don't do it. I need it as a thing on my as I'm campaigning. I need to say border security
I need
is
this
bad.
to be an issue.
Right.
Can Democrats use that bipartisan bill that Trump killed against him?
I would say to you that you are presenting a logical argument to an illogical conversation, right? Like the fact that Republicans, and we're talking across the board Republicans, the middle ground ones, I'm making that up because I don't know that those exist anymore. The Trumpians, like they are all officially like, hey, we're not having a conversation about bipartisan bills anymore. We're having conversations about impeaching the president or impeaching a secretary, or we don't even want to talk about that. We want to talk about school vouchers and connect that to immigration. Like I'm like, I don't know what the pass is at this point.
Roland Gutierrez, we're going to take him live now with our live stream. He is speaking at the Friendly Spot.
yeah, let's listen in.
Or will be speaking shortly at the Friendly Spot.
He's testing his microphone.
How you doing tonight? I want to hear that big crowd of mine. Where are my friends in Uvalde out there? Listen, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. We're going to give you a brief update tonight as we sit here at this wonderful place my friends Jody and Steve own, called the Friendly Spot. So here's the update. The Spurs are down to the Rockets by 1. They're all come on over. You guys come on back. Come on. You're all right. No big speeches yet. Listen, everybody, this is, I am proud. Sarah, where are you? Where's my wife? Where are my children? Get over here. We're not done tonight. We've got a long night ahead of you, so I hope you're ready to stick around for a while. Let me tell you something. Texas is a great big state, and I've traveled every bit of it, 254 counties, and I've talked to people far and wide in the state of Texas, and it's an amazing place with amazing people. I just got a text from Joe Schuster, the county judge in Pecos County, and he said, Roland, you killed it. You got 111 votes, and the congressman got 40. So there's going to be counties like that across this state. We have yet to even get through the early vote in the state of Texas, so that's why we're in for a very long night, folks. And so we're going to give you another update in about a half an hour. We have got just about 6 or 7 counties in on their early vote. We've got a lot more. We're still missing some of the bigger counties on early vote. We have a lot of the small counties in South Texas that haven't even come in yet. And so this is how democracy works. And sometimes it's painful, and sometimes it takes a lot, but every bit of it is going out and shaking hands with wonderful people like this from my friends from Uvalde, Texas, because that's what this race was about. This race was about Jackie Cáceres. This race was about Lexi Rubio. This race was about Tess Mata. This race was about Uzziah Garcia. This race is about every child out there in Uvalde, Texas, and so many others, and 2 teachers. We're going to have that discussion here in a minute, but we're not done yet, not hardly. But we don't give up in San Antonio, Texas. I want to thank you so much for being here. Cameras, give me another 30 minutes, and we're going to give you a better update. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Seguro que sí, en español. We're not going to do any questions yet.
It is from Roland Gutierrez, live from the front.
Todavía estamos esperando.
All right, that's the very latest from Roland Gutierrez, live from the friendly spot downtown in the King William District. Not giving up yet.
No, and certainly sounding much more positive than his numbers would reflect at this point. Colin Allred with 62% of the vote, Roland Gutierrez with 16 right now. This, of course, the contest to see who opposes Senator Ted Cruz in the general election in November. You saw Gutierrez there behind him. He was backed by families, parents, guardians of some of the victims of the Robb Elementary School shooting. He talked about how this campaign for him has been about Uvalde. And he certainly, he represents that district, obviously something that has had an incredible impact on that area, Texas and beyond. But I have heard in this conversation about who will go up against Ted Cruz, that is not enough. As difficult as it is to say that out loud, that is not enough.
And listen, I appreciate the advocate that Roland Gutierrez has been for the Uvalde survivors and for the Uvalde victims and their families. But when you look at this margin, it just keeps growing as the night goes on. When we first checked in, it was 57% for Allred. Now he's at 62%. I want to ask the panel here, are you surprised with that message from Roland Gutierrez at this point in the night? Molly?
I mean, I can't fault anyone for being an optimist. So, I mean, okay, good, yes, Roland, but I'm like, I don't know how he comes back to this, this won't go to a runoff. We're not looking at hundreds of votes here. Right. Or 50 votes. We're looking at thousands of votes, and I think that's. I'm like, well done. I'm like, Grant Moody, who is ahead in his race, was more tempered than Roland Gutierrez, which is interesting to me, and I think it also speaks to a man who desperately wanted to be able to take what he has learned in Uvalde to the state, right?
There was so much emotion in that race because of his representation of that community and, of course, what they've been through. So
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
that's got to play into that to some degree.
Right.
Right.
Let me add a little bit to that. I served with Roland on city council.
Right.
And he is absolutely smart enough to know that you don't come back from this. However, remember, legislators are not held to the same rules that like county commissioners are, resigned to run. Okay? So he gets to keep his seat.
Right. He's still in the state senate.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So his speech there may just be as much about I'm still strong in my Senate
Yeah.
seat as it is I really want to be U.S. Senator.
And I'm still strong for them, right? The
That's what I'm saying.
families.
It
and
could
that
also
emotion
be
piece,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
These families made the trip
Yes.
from Uvalde to be
Yes.
with him. He didn't want them behind him
That's
for
right.
a concession speech.
Yeah.
Good point.
Let me add this next part of the puzzle, because we can speculate here. We're not talking to our supporters at this point. 62% for Colin Allred. He easily looks like he's going to win this primary. Is he someone that makes the Cruz campaign concerned?
No.
That was
No.
a very quick no. Why?
Why?
Can we say Beto O'Rourke?
You can say Beto O'Rourke, sure, but that was a close race.
You had more steam behind that race, and it still
Can we say the money he raised? I mean, he was targeting moderate Republicans. He had so much money, right? People were mowing his name in their yards. He was on Oprah. He had a national.
He was also under the seat of everyone's chair at Oprah. She was like, you get a Beto.
Yeah.
And you get a Beto.
I mean, he had a national fundraising campaign, and he still couldn't make it work. And
Can
so, I wish Colin
But
Allred the best.
football.
I'm not- Texas football is
Yeah.
another thing. I will say, look, do I want Colin Allred to pull us through? Yeah, I do. I really do. But me being realistic about this ain't happening.
If this was 10 years from now, it might be a different story.
Yeah.
In other words,
Yeah.
what we talked about earlier is are things changing? Okay?
Yeah.
And I think yes. And so if you fast forward 10 years and the Republican Party continues to eat itself and whatever, then he wins.
I mean, you're also looking
Still too soon.
Yeah, just even looking at returns right now, we're looking at 900,000 votes for Ted Cruz and 320,000 votes for Colin Allred. Again, I understand it's primary and we're not talking regular races or whatever, but I'm like, hey, there's a fervor behind Trump.
I'm gonna look up further.
So you are discounting right now the early polls that show it tight between those two.
Listen, I think that we also have to have a whole conversation about polls, which is not going to take place right here on this panel,
Yeah.
And how we conduct those polls and where they go from there. And I would imagine that our professor, the power panel professor, would have much to say
he's not
about
coming.
polls.
Yeah, come
But
on in. Come on in, John Taylor.
so-
I want to jump on that too.
Yeah. I mean, let me be the devil's advocate here. Let me say, Allred is much more bipartisan than Beto O'Rourke was.
Which
And-
is also
and
part of the problem.
That's what I'm saying. Is that a plus or is that a minus?
Right now, what we know is that a Democrat who purports to be run-of-the-mill Democrat, right? He's not super liberal, he's not super progressive, is showing us he can't get people out to vote,
Yeah.
right? From a Democrat side, that he cannot get people jazzed. On the opposite end, somebody who's very, very far right is like, come on, come on down. So I think you put in a moderate Democrat who no one's excited about from a younger, that's what we've been talking about. No one's turning out to vote. And I'm like, right, because no one's excited about who's on the Democratic ticket.
But yeah, that's from the top down.
Right.
It's a lackluster
That's right.
feel.
Yes.
Yeah, from the top of the
To
ballot.
quote from, I think, basketball, the roof is the ceiling, or the floor is the ceiling. Sorry. No statewide Democrat has got more than about 42, other than Beto O'Rourke, about 42% in the last 15, 20 years. And all due respect to Colin Allred, he's also just a little bit boring, which doesn't help, that doesn't energize. He's a great candidate. On paper, fantastic. Here's the other problem. He's going to be attacked for being a wild-eyed liberal because he went to Cal Berkeley.
And no matter what his policies are.
Right.
Because of the research he did at Cal Berkeley. Yeah. And that's going to hurt him. I mean, it just is. I mean, it's a fact of life. As for polling, look, we can talk all day about polling. We have a brand new Center for Public Opinion Research at UTSA. And we're working on it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm not going to diss polling at all, thank you. The problem is how we're doing them right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I hold up a cell phone for a reason, because so many people no longer have landlines. You're not answering phones. It's becoming more difficult. Yes, there's all sorts of ways to do polling. But we're having difficulty. We absolutely are. There's no question about it. I mean, there was a New York Times poll just the other day that's been ripped to shreds.
I saw that, yeah.
Regarding Biden versus Trump. So imagine now try to do polling for Allred versus Cruz. Now, generically, Ted Cruz is roughly tied with generic Democrat. Part of it is because Ted Cruz has a high unlikability factor to him. If this was John Cornyn, this race would be over.
Right.
But Ted Cruz makes it at least a little bit of a race. I don't think much of a race, but makes it a race.
Interesting. Allred has money.
Got lots of
He
money.
does. That's because he was a football player.
Joe Biden.
I just want to keep saying it.
If we go back to the money aspect,
No.
Joe Biden has a lot more money than Donald Trump.
He does. They closed out Q4 much higher, and still, if he's not going to change and shift the way that he's talking about everything from immigration to Gaza, he is not, no matter the money, he cannot buy enough social media ads to convince young voters to come out for him.
Joe Biden's problem is not Donald Trump, it's his own party.
Agreed.
That's the problem.
That's one. He's running against Donald Trump, and he should not
To be honest, they need to be walking into a local grocery store and through a drive-through to recognize what the other problem is.
Right.
And that is the issue. Yes, inflation is down, but people are still being hit hard, and Democrats have to come up with a solution on that.
And I will mention something about polls, and it's the cross tabulations. We see the top lines all the time. But it's not the real meat and the real story behind why people believe what they believe. And a poll 90 days ago is not relevant to 90 days after. And so you got to throw that in there, right? Because climates and attitudes change depending on Biden or Trump can say one thing 30 days ago, and now it changes the whole shift of the whole country.
Polling's like milk.
Right,
There's an expiration
and
date.
they're very expensive, right? And so we applaud you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
You know, it's not an easy thing to do.
And my colleague Brian Gervais, I'll give a shout out to him.
Even when we did them scientifically,
we did do Fairfax polls.
Even when we did them scientifically,
and I will say they were pretty accurate.
Well, when we did them scientifically, we still got calls from the community saying, "Hey, how did you guys come up with this?" And you know, you got to give the demographics and the methodology on how we came up with the sampling.
And it ain't easy because there's all sort of, we can do an entire stats class if you like right now.
That's all right. That's a Q&A. Don't make me demote you from professor.
KSAT Q&A. KSAT
You
Q&A.
take your tenure right away.
I don't know. I think it's really a KSAT explained.
KSAT explains,
Maybe so. Exactly.
Stats would be
KSAT explains.
That would be awesome.
I think he's going to lose.
Do we have any updated numbers that we can go to right now as far as Allred, as far as
Phelan's
Kemple,
down.
as far as some of the county races?
Kemple is still behind. Troxler's now ahead.
Troxler's now ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
Landon, our producer, you just mentioned District 121. That's a race we hadn't taken a look at in a while. Do we have the totals for that we can pull up?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're fired up.
Okay.
Still all the early voting numbers.
Here's 121. Mark LaHood still at 54% with 28%.
No new numbers for Bexar County?
That is, I mean,
He's out.
just under 2,000 votes. That seems like a lot to make up at this point with 29% reporting. And I really kind of thought this was heading to a runoff.
So did I, or at least maybe Allison winning without a runoff. It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
It just,
either.
I mean, it certainly
but it's still-
shows the power of the governor.
Well, in
in
121,
this race.
most Republicans in Bexar County live in 121.
Exactly, they do. They do.
They live in 121.
Yep. I mean, I live in that area.
If the governor
Trust me.
says go right, that's where
That's
they're
where
going.
they go. Yeah.
State Representative District 44, Alan Schoolcraft still leading John Kemple, but again, it is under that 50% mark with 77% reporting. I think this is going to go to a runoff.
You're getting
Yeah.
both counties now in. You didn't have that before. And the numbers have stayed relatively steady with now both Gonzales and Guadalupe County in.
Yeah.
Or at least most of the way in.
I think
It's interesting to me that this was also, Kemple was one of the ones that was targeted by the governor. He's losing, but not as badly as Steve Allison is tonight.
Do we have updated numbers on Allison? Because I
None.
don't see any election.
No,
there haven't been
Those
any
are still at
new numbers.
28%.
Yeah, no
Imagine if
election
this goes
day.
to a runoff, this one, where they've spent
they'll
almost
both
$1 million
come in late,
bucks.
too, 'cause they
How
go
much
after
more is
all
going to be
those.
dumped in over the next month?
Absolutely. This was also one where
So
there
there
was
we
a
go,
lot of
Troxler.
money.
Yeah.
And Troxler seems to be surviving. At least at this point, it looks that way.
Yeah.
The numbers suggest strongly she's going to end up surviving this one.
And she was under attack by Paxton, correct?
Yes.
not by Abbott.
Yeah.
There is one other thing we ought to mention.
You're looking at Dade Phelan.
And that is,
I hope
I'm
you're
pulling it
talking
up on
about
my
that.
phone because I had to pull it up. It is the 3 State Court of Criminal Appeals justices. All 3 targeted by Paxton. All 3 are losing. 2 of them by double digits, 1 by single digits. Looks like they're all going down to defeat, which means Ken Paxton has had a direct role in potentially reshaping the Court of Criminal Appeals, which he could face in the next few months.
Right.
Gee, go figure.
Right.
Yeah.
So weird. That's so weird.
Yeah.
Strange.
Like he planned it.
It's like he almost thought
Oh
about
my
it.
gosh, yeah.
It's the same. I'm looking at like
Strategery.
a strategery. I'm looking at Dade Phelan and how he's at 37%.
He's gone.
He's gone.
That's the Speaker of the House.
The
And I'm trying
sitting
to think-
Speaker of the House.
History, the last time a speaker
Joe
lost,
Strauss.
lost
Well, he got censured.
No,
Yeah,
got
okay.
censured, but the last time a speaker lost re-election or lost a primary for re-election, I can't think of one.
Gus Mutcher.
Yeah, Mutcher back in, because of the Sharpstown scandal
Sharpstown.
back in 1972. There we go.
Oh yes, back in 1972. I loved that election.
Give me.
That was,
give you that one.
that's the era of Dolph
Give you that
Briscoe,
one.
Ben
Yes.
Barnes, and all that.
Pull that one out of their hat.
Yeah,
I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
I pulled that right out of here.
I know. It's under the open road there.
Anything in the 70s is in that hat.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You go back 60s, then it's all just in the tiny hairs.
I'm impressed.
That was a scandal. That was the biggest in the country until Watergate.
Well, you talking
Yeah.
about history repeating itself.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, Dade.
Brought down a governor, brought
Out.
down a lieutenant governor, brought down a speaker. Speaker went to prison.
Yep.
Yeah. But Troxler Biederman, this was also the governor against
Governor
the
against the AG. Go figure.
And Biederman was a rep in a different district.
Correct.
Before. Retired.
And then
came
came
out
back.
of retirement to run
Yep.
in this district.
Well, and we should be talking, right? We're seeing both, right? Our current governor and the attorney general, like picking and handling, right, who they want to actually move through. So this is also hey, could we potentially see this happen
Yes.
at some point as well? And if I was Ken Paxton, I'd be like, I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Maybe I
be-
could go up against Greg Abbott.
Well, let's be clear.
Really?
This is happening with both parties. One is just being quiet about it.
Exactly. One
Yes.
is being quiet about it.
Yes.
But in the case of Ken Paxton versus Greg Abbott, I would place more money on Ken Paxton running against John Cornyn.
Oh, there could be that. Yes, you're right. Although the whole part of Mitch McConnell, this is where we get super nerdy, but Mitch McConnell basically saying,
nerd out. Go on.
Mitch McConnell is
Do
about
it.
to not be, right? He's moving on. He doesn't want to be the speaker, right? And so John Cornyn is already saying, I may do it. And if he gets that, it's going to be really, really hard to
will be.
unseat John Cornyn.
Well, you know, nerding out on politics is basically what we do.
I mean, that's what
yeah.
this
I
is.
mean, I'm just saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we have more on the Tony Gonzalez race. Is that right? Landon's our producer. Want to make sure we can get you the very latest on that race. All right, this is with 94% reporting.
Yeah.
48% Gonzalez, 21% Herrera, 14% for Julie Clark.
Yeah.
You know,
Looks like a runoff.
Let's see where
it
those
looks
last
like a
votes come from.
runoff, but you also, I mean, don't you kind of have to figure that Julie Clark's numbers are more likely to go to Brandon Herrera
Oh, no question.
than Tony Gonzalez?
She's the one who led the censure effort against Tony Gonzalez with the state Republican Party. Absolutely, it'll go to Brandon Herrera.
Yeah, this is going to be very interesting. That makes it a very interesting race.
Absolutely,
then,
it does.
If you go back and see, I mean, Tony Gonzalez was very defiant at one point, saying,
yeah.
I want people to run against me. I'm going to take them to the deep end and drown them.
Be careful what you wish
Something
for.
like that, and it looks as if he's getting that tonight.
Yep.
It also, I was struck. I was
Marines.
I was struck by the fact that Tony Gonzalez did not have a watch party tonight. He did not have a campaign party. He had a small group of family that
Media
got
kept
together.
outside of that. Daniela, at last check, she had still not been able to touch base
I assume
with
maybe
them.
he had his internal polling suggesting.
That's what I wonder, if he knew he wasn't going to get to 50%
Maybe.
tonight.
Yeah.
Quite possible.
Well, it could be that, hey, he just wants to show folks that he's working, right? And there's more things to do than host a watch party. I'm out in my community, so that could be a place.
Does that
too.
happen often?
No, it doesn't happen.
Okay, I just was asking. I mean, maybe there's something I need to know.
Can we just pontificate here?
No, you can.
I'm just giving them some grace, you know.
I was just asking the question if that happens often.
I do think I know we're talking Texas and we're talking very specifically, right, presidential, but there are other races that are happening. We are in a Super Tuesday,
yes,
right, which is going to shape the way that our Senate looks, the way our House looks, the way laws can be passed, the way policies will move. We'll start to see conversations around immigration or education or DEI or curriculum at the national level. So I do think it's interesting. They're not there yet, and I realize we're in Texas. We're not allowed to talk about California. Whatever. But there is a major Senate race happening in California, right?
Yeah,
that will shape. Like that's a big.
Yes.
We're seeing a major. Nothing's in yet because California, and they're too early.
We can talk about California. Just don't bring the taxes over here.
Is that what it is? Okay. Yeah, because we've got 15 other states having primaries this evening. That's why they call it Super Tuesday. And then you also have to look to what next week or the week after. Arizona just lost Senator Sinema, who's been sort of a waffly vote in the Senate, which gave a sort of majority to the Democrats, has decided she's out. She's not going to run. So I do think that there's going to be some interesting things happening, shaping up nationally that always will influence state, that will always influence local, because obviously what happens here is also, global.
So, I like to play the devil's advocate every once in a while on this show. You know that.
I haven't heard that at all this evening.
Can I make Myra's rolling her eyes. I
just looked at her.
Yeah, it's a reflex.
Can I make the argument that Democrats got on the border issue way too late?
Oh, no, you can't make that argument at all.
Okay. Kevin, can I make that argument?
Yes, you can.
No. I mean, it seems to me that they're a little late to the game.
Well,
even with the bipartisan deal, even with Biden coming down here.
But a bipartisan deal that's very conservative, so it's not really bipartisan.
Well, no, I know, but they just made that deal.
They didn't.
Within the last few months, and this is something that people like Greg Abbott and Donald Trump have been harping on for years.
Yeah, neither of them did anything.
Right, but it doesn't matter. They're not in the White House right now. So that's what my point is.
Perception is everything in politics.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, the perception is that the Republicans let it fail. But it's not.
But I
should say the reality is that Republicans let it fail. Perception is Democrats got on it too late.
But well, no, I'm just saying go back before the bipartisan bill.
Oh, sure.
Go back before that. I mean, what were Democrats messaging on the
infrastructure
border and migration?
I wouldn't say they got on it too late. I think what's happening was they fundamentally have two different ideologies about how to fix it.
Yes.
And it's not that we've always been part of the border conversation. I'm saying the Democrats came late. No.
Right.
I think what you're seeing now is them saying, well, we're tired of beating our heads against the wall. We're not going to do. It's not going to help us. There is a real crisis. Let's come to the table and see. And this is part of Biden. He's been a pragmatic. He's been throughout his career. And I think you've seen that. But unfortunately, he ran into Trump.
And this is, it's an issue that's obviously existed for decades, but it is at such a granular level now. I mean, our Know My Neighborhood that we recently did on the Shearer Hills Ridgeview neighborhood. This is a neighborhood that has been in the national spotlight because it is home to the Migrant Resource Center.
Yes.
They have folks hanging out on street corners and, ladies sharing hot dogs with people who need something to eat because it's impacting people truly where they live. And that, I think, is maybe what's a little bit different about this conversation.
Yeah, but I would offer that it's not for lack of trying or coming to the conversation. I think it is absolutely fundamentally about immigration and how are we making it, where is the path possible, and border security. And I think it is much easier to scare people than it is to have conversations that are complex about the bureaucratic turn of how do we make it so people can actually come through. And to be fair, as a human who is near the Migrant Resource Center in said neighborhood, the challenge is absolutely about a standstill in funding for folks who are migrants in the Migrant Resource Center from the Texas legislature, which happens to be run by Republicans.
Yes. And I'm not saying I agree with the devil
I
advocacy.
know.
I'm just asking the question because
Yeah,
I think there's a
I get
perception
it.
out there that what took Joe Biden so long to come to the border and talk to the Border Patrol? What took Democrats so long to try and put up some sort of a bipartisan bill, whether it's actually bipartisan or not? Kevin, I see
Both parties think that the best answer is not to have an answer.
Right.
Because they get to run to certain bases based on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, isn't that why this issue has been going on
That's
for years
one
and
of the
years
biggest,
administration after
absolutely
administration?
biggest
Yes.
reasons.
Who gets to own it?
It's a much better political weapon if wielded correctly, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, that's easy. I mean, this goes back to Thomas Hobbes, right? Like, if you can scare somebody into moving, it's easier than trying to win them over with hope and change and stuff.
Yeah.
I'll just scare you.
He's from the cartoon Hobbes.
That's right. It's him and the cat.
That's what I thought,
Yeah.
That was at UTSA policy.
I know. I was like, wow, that's the UTSA education, Thomas Hobbes.
That's right.
You
I'm
know.
just saying, it's all about fear.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got.
Wah, wah.
I know.
No, I like that. I know.
That's so
I'm
sad.
impressed by the Thomas Hobbes.
Sorry. I'm sorry, y'all.
So we're going to talk about Machiavelli and.
Yeah, we could. I mean,
We're gonna
hi,
talk about
let's
Marx,
talk
otherwise
Trump.
we'll get in trouble with the state.
no
I mean, yeah, it starts to get in trouble.
Yeah. All right, let's do some numbers right now. I think
Yeah,
we have numbers for the Uvalde area.
Yeah, let's take a look at District 80, I believe, is where we have an update. Don McLaughlin Jr., of course, he is the former mayor that stepped down as mayor to run for this seat. Looks like he is going to be running away with this race. Strong support in the Uvalde community tonight.
Yeah, let's check out the Democratic
here we
side
go.
of the ledger. We have not checked that out yet. And you can see Rosie Cuellar with 27%, Cecilia Castellano with 23%, and Teresa Johnson Hernandez with 22%. This is a very close race. And I do, Don McLaughlin is very popular, but I do want to point out this was a Democrat that actually was in this House district, Representative King, before he decided not to run for re-election.
Right. And Cuellar, let's not forget, is also related to Congressman Cuellar. Was encouraged, in fact, to run for this particular seat.
It's still, obviously, it's going to a runoff, but it's a real question right there. Which two candidates will
Yeah.
make it to the runoff with 67% reporting right now?
Do we have any other updates, Producer Landon, in our numbers? I know we were standing by to get another update to actually hear from Roland Gutierrez. He told us that cameras give him 30 more minutes and he would have some sort of other update.
Yeah, let's go to 121 right now if we can and get us, I think the numbers have been updated
Are they
a
moving?
little bit there.
Oh,
Yeah,
there we are.
29%, still 54, 39. It's been roughly a 2,000 vote margin, and that's even been expanded a little bit by Mark LaHood tonight. And you see Michael Champion's votes would not, even if all of them voted for Steve Allison, it would not have made up the margin between these two men.
What was fascinating about Allison, he was advertising at the time that I agree on the government with everything but vouchers.
Well,
And here we are.
It did seem to me that Allison went after Mark LaHood
For being liberal.
hard, but he didn't go at, he didn't seem to, he had a very narrow pathway.
Yeah.
And he tried to, thread that needle between calling out LaHood but not calling out the governor.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can't call out the governor in a strong Republican district. You just can't do it. Greg Abbott's too popular.
And I
Yeah,
realize
clearly we're seeing
your
that
point.
tonight, right?
Right.
I realize your part, DeMonte, that this is where most of the Republicans live.
from
But it's
New
also
York, yeah.
Joe Strauss represented this district for a long time.
In 10 years, I think.
Yeah, and had many challengers to his right on several occasions.
Democrats would
and
save him.
won.
Yeah.
Democrats would save him.
And if
He
people
also
are
didn't. He also didn't have a Trump space, right? Like
Right.
I'm like
Yeah.
he
That's
wasn't
what I'm saying.
running now.
Would Joe Strauss have won
I think
in
that's
this
a-
political climate?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, people, if they're not familiar with the district, it stretches from Alamo Heights to Stone Oak.
Yeah.
That gives you an idea about the district.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's that point in the night where we kind of want to get everyone's take on where things stand right now. John, I want to start with you. What's your read on a big takeaway?
It's a good night for Greg Abbott and Ken Paxton. who are not on the
any
ballot,
sort of ballot.
but they are having tremendous influence tonight.
Yeah.
That would be my big takeaway.
Yeah. Kevin, what about you?
No, I echo that. You know, for some guys that aren't on the ballot, they're sure having a big effect on the ballot. You know, and I think that ought to worry people. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Okay, you know, if you can manipulate the power that well, it's it's a dangerous thing.
Yeah. Are you surprised?
I am a little surprised. I thought, especially with Steve Allison, that here's a guy that, as near as I can tell, everybody I talk to, he's well liked, he's engaged, he's smart, he's doing a good job as an elected representative. The optimist in me says that should be the criteria of whether or not you get to serve.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's not what I'm seeing.
No.
Molly?
Yeah, I mean, yes, +1. And separately, I would say turnout would, couching this with, it's a primary, it's an incumbent versus an incumbent, quite frankly. It's literally the race nobody wanted is what's happening. Like no one wanted this, and here we go again. And I think if I was at the top of the Democrat ticket, I would be thinking, ooh, we're in trouble. Even if we're in Texas and we're seeing low voter turnout, uncommitted or undervotes across the board, crossing demographic, age, race, gender, I would be really, really nervous if I was the Democrat.
Yeah, think about what you said. It's resounding successes in the primary.
Right.
Okay, for a race nobody wanted.
Nobody.
November's gonna be real interesting to see how that goes.
Joe Biden did, and his granddaughters wanted it. Obviously,
yeah.
Trump does.
If this is a precursor for November, I mean,
yeah,
wow.
it's bad. Like literally, we're all just gonna be sitting like this.
Wow. But I agree with my colleagues here. For me, it's the turnout thing. It's really a bummer, man. And so we really got to figure out as a community what to do to increase, no matter what side you vote on, but just the participation in our local government and our local politics, being civically engaged about the really critical issues that happen in this community. We got to do something about that, and that's what stood out more to me. I mean, you kind of think the incumbents are going to do what they're going to do. I was surprised by Allison, but not really, because we've seen. What I was surprised is that those federal type of politics kind of stayed up there. And now we're seeing that cascade down throughout the state races and the local races. And I didn't really anticipate that, but that's kind of what I was surprised by, is now that's a reality here locally.
And I think that's what I take out of this, is that my message is always, I don't care who you vote for. Just vote.
Yeah.
Just be engaged. And you can break it down any way you want to, but if you get out there and vote, you have a voice.
I just want to make sure that we're being very clear that sometimes a non-vote is a vote,
yes.
Particularly right now with a movement of uncommitted and undervoting on the Democrat side to send a message, a multiracial, multi-generational message, a movement of folks who are saying, hey, if you don't figure it out, we will stay home.
Yeah. And that's a good point. What I want to interested in is the black votes for Biden, right? Because if you remember, the senator from South Carolina,
Scott.
No, not Scott. Democrat side.
Clyburn.
Clyburn saved Biden.
Yeah.
Right. With black voters.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so, I'm interested to see the difference between that time and then now. What I'm feeling, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah.
It was black women in particular.
You're
Always.
absolutely
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, women
protect black
kick
women.
Oh,
men's
no
butt,
question.
both in the Republican and Democrat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a great way to wrap this up. Thank you so much for putting a bow on it.
It is Women's History Month.
I am used to it.
Women's History Month.
That's right.
Well done.
Women's History Month. Yeah.
Well done.
I don't think I've ever seen Myra give a high five before, so that's impressive. Again, I want to give a big thanks to our power panel, to our professor of the power panel, John Taylor.
Hey, we got a new member.
Kevin Wolf, Molly Cox, DeMonte Alexander. You know I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Myra as well. What did we just get handed there?
So Bexar County numbers in terms of Biden and Trump. Biden 41,512. Trump 41,348.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh yes.
With an overall turnout of 13%.
Yes.
Oh no.
14% overall turnout.
This is our version
Yeah.
of writing it on the whiteboards.
And yeah,
as they
couple-
do
I'm seriously
in
getting a
county.
whiteboard for the next time.
City council and mayor races
In
next
November.
year.
That's what I think.
There we go.
That's an 8%
back to
dip
old
from
school.
2020 in turnout.
That's why he's the
8%.
professor.
Yeah, 2020. There's about 23%, 22.5% in 2020 for primary.
Right.
We're at 14% this
14%.
year. That's a pretty decent dip.
I am so glad you're here to do the math.
And turn-
I'm no
That's
good at
about what I
that
called.
public
It's about what I called.
It's the UTSA education.
That's right.
In action
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank
For
you.
those of you who have joined us throughout this entire thing, we always appreciate your viewership, always appreciate your chiming in, letting us know what you liked and didn't like. And of course, a lot of races are still out there. Will people make 50% or not? We'll have the very latest results, of course, on KSAT.com and at 10 o'clock on the night.
Yeah, we'll see you then.
Good night.